the world educated at this point, and basically he's not tied to anything, so his information.
You guys hear me in the Telegram group?
He's not here yet. Very technical, but he won't understand.
All right, T-minus 3 minutes, guys.
Because he basically is like, he explains his he's more not just about the technical aspects, but about why and what's the truth about it.
Hey, you guys who are online, if you could hit the like button and subscribe button, it can help us get more people watching live. Still in pre-show here. All right, T-minus 2 minutes to restart, guys.
Okay. Yeah,
You guys can get started in about 2 minutes. You guys hear me online?
Yeah, I need to find from there on out the one.
All right, guys. It's 5 o'clock. Time to get started here, folks. Wow, we got a packed house. Welcome, welcome. What a difference a week makes. Holy smokes. What happened? Did you guys even sleep this past 48 hours? All right, well, let's talk about it. I'm glad you guys are all here so we can figure it out together. This is the filter number 126. Why is it called the filter? Because there's all kinds of noise out there. It's hard to figure out what reality is. And so we figure it out together every Tuesday night at 5 o'clock local time here in Bali at Hubud. Thanks for coming. What are we going to talk about tonight? Well, there's just not much going on. I think it's going to be a short night tonight. We're going to go to Kismet afterwards. So, well, we won't take all night talking. But we're going to talk more about BTC versus BCH. I think the last week has given us these two contenders, but we still don't know who the winner is, or do we even need a winner? I don't know. Yes, ding, ding, ding. So it's an ideological battle, but it's also a catty slap fest. And if you're on Reddit, you know what I'm talking about. So we're going to try and get to the bottom of it, at least describe what's going on and how to think about these things. I was just talking to someone just before the meeting, and they were saying that a lot of this stuff is like, you know, there's a lot of vocabulary and it seems very technical, but I think when it comes right down to it, it's going to be what people decide and what end users decide and how they're going to use this stuff. And you don't need to be super technical to figure out what you think might work in society. I mean, we've all been living in society for our whole lives. So we're actually very qualified, I think, to comment on whether this stuff is going to work or not. So am I hearing the echo or is it just something else? Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen with the guys at home, and let's get started. All right. All right, the filter number 126. Let's kick it off. So just after we got together last week, well, last week we had the electrical outage. It was an impromptu meeting at Kismet where we there was drinking involved, like at a very early stage. Not very many slides up to talk about, but a lot of gossiping. But after that meeting, we got the news that SegWit 2X hard fork is now canceled. So when we all got together last time in this room, we were all talking about SegWit 2X. It was going to happen on November 16th. We had Bitcoin. We had Bitcoin Cash. Then we were going to have this new something else again, BT2, BTX, SegWit 2X. And well, thank goodness for my brain cells, because it was getting a little bit, my brain was getting a little bit, I don't know, there wasn't much more real estate up there for another Bitcoin. And they canceled SegWit 2X. I was very happy to get this news. I thought, oh, well, now the drama's all over. But indeed, it had just begun. All right. So
I think it was conspiracy. The power went out here. All over the world, power went out.
Yes. Yes, who was responsible? Okay. The real Satoshi Nakamoto? All right, guys. Yeah, so the SegWit 2X hard fork is canceled. All of the miners that originally signed the New York agreement decided that they weren't going to push for this fork. The main guy, Jeff Garzik, he was the one developing this solution, kind of got on board with not pushing this fork. He's also working on an altcoin, so maybe he was distracted anyway. But in essence, we got this new information shortly after we last got together. So what has happened in the meantime? Well, here's where we got the news. November 8th. Here's the price of Bitcoin over the last week. We went from over $7,500 per Bitcoin down. Why is this happening? Down to what was the low? Does anyone know what the low was?
5,000 something.
Yeah, 5,500, something like that. Who would like to postulate, pontificate, or otherwise enlighten us on why we started seeing a crash in the price of Bitcoin? Matthew.
I think it's sort of like a civil war.
Yeah.
It's a civil war, and it's a zero-sum game. So it's like there's a certain amount of money being flushed into the market, and you're either, it was kind of like two camps, and not a lot of people were in both. So it was either like there seemed to be a pretty good inverse relationship.
Yeah, as soon as it happened, as soon as this happened, here's the
BTC.
Here's the Bitcoin time machine. As soon as it happened, this is like a roller coaster ride. This is like everybody's got their hands up and we're going woo all the way down to 5,500. And yeah, it's unclear why. I think, well, if there were people that were waiting for the SegWit 2X to come out, that was a big block suggestion, right? Like we want big blocks, and we want that. Maybe they wanted SegWit as well, and since they weren't going to get SegWit with a block size increase, does that mean that they put their economic voting power behind Bitcoin Cash and not Bitcoin itself?
So might BCH versus BTC also be a small current block versus big block ideology battle?
Yeah, I mean, what's the scaling solution? Is it segregated witness, or is it bigger blocks? And with the cancellation of SegWit 2X, perhaps, well, it seems from an economic standpoint that all of the people that were on the fence, or maybe waiting for that to happen, piled into Bitcoin Cash. Let's take a look at the Bitcoin Cash price. Here's the direct inverse. On the 9th of November, we were climbing. And at one point, I think that Bitcoin Cash was even more valuable than Ethereum. It actually took the place in second spot for Ethereum. So,
and it also had actually more. What do you call? What's the term for mining?
hash power.
There was more hash power than Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yes, very, very astute. And
it rose to. It went from what? It went from 10 million to 37 million in how many hours?
10 million to 37 million what?
Rupiah.
Ah,
The
okay.
price of Bitcoin Cash within
It was like 23 hours.
within a couple of hours.
It looked like Mount Boom. That looked like I don't know.
This is- yes. We had our own eruption here. This is not blowing off its top. Well, and then we've got kind of a cooling off period. So what exactly is going on here? We're going to talk about it. Let's look at this is the current Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, coin market cap, where you've got Bitcoin at 110 billion. The nearest rival is Ethereum, but like I said, Bitcoin Cash was at one point worth more than Ethereum was, and now Bitcoin Cash is down around 21 million. So, do we believe that this represents the sentiment in the world that Bitcoin is 5 times more valuable than Bitcoin Cash, that Bitcoin is 3.5 times more valuable than Ethereum? Is the market voting here, or is this distorted in some way?
Well, so much of the activity happened on Korean exchanges, right? So.
Oh, really? What's that? I didn't hear about
You didn't see that?
No. So
on Bitum, on the Korean exchanges, there was so much activity purchasing Bitcoin Cash. So I don't know. Does that say that the market is agreeing, or is it just a portion of the market influencing price?
well, if you'll what's that?
How big is the Korean market?
Well, here's the thing, and I'm just going to put my tinfoil hat on for you guys. Just one moment while I put that on. Okay, now I have it on. China is no longer trading Bitcoin, right? They shut down all the exchanges. So what is the proxy for Chinese trading?
K-pop.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's Gangnam Style Bitcoin trading going on.
What about Japan?
What?
I mean, I read the other day that Japan is the second largest market now.
Yeah. Japan's right in there too. But don't the Chinese and the Japanese, aren't they kind of like?
No, but I'm just talking about
Yes.
like, over the weekend.
Yeah,
Is there any info about which exchanges have the biggest volume or the biggest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Korea
Was it Korea?
Yeah, it's Korea.
Of the
It was on
overall.
CoinMarketCap.
When it was
Yeah.
peaking at 50%, then it went down to 35%.
So who, 50% was Korea, then who was after? Who was after? Was it
When the
over the weekend? It was nuts.
the first day when it showed up so crazy, Korea had 50% of all of the trading volume of Bitcoin Cash, and then the following 2 days it went back to 35-36%. But my take on that would be that Roger Ver had a massive, propaganda running in Korea, and
Or in China.
that kicked that off, as well as having, of course, a perfect sales pitch, a classic sales track pitch for this product. So,
Yeah.
and that's
perfect
reflective
timing.
in my eyes. That's reflective in the number. It's a really great sales pitch, and that's that. And of course, his own manipulation. Apparently, he threw in 45,000 bitcoins into the ring to
Right. So you've got it is a bit of a civil war, and you've got this contingent from China and the Bitcoin Cash folks, Roger Ver and Jihan Wu, and they are, they split on August 1st, and this SegWit 2x was a bit of a distraction while people got used to Bitcoin Cash and maybe got their Bitcoins moving. And then this was almost like a catalyst for a big flippening push, if you will, to try and get people to move to Bitcoin Cash. And it was a pretty good effort. You can see what happened economically, but we're also going to look at where people were voting with their hash power. Matthew alluded to this just a moment ago, but we're going to take a look at that. Of course, hashing power is all of the computing power that secures the Bitcoin network, that secures the Bitcoin Cash network. It's real things, real machines using real electricity to secure the network. And so it's not like filling out a Twitter poll. I mean, you're kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And well, we're gonna explore that piece of it and see what that effect had on the overall landscape. So let's see. Let's take a look here.
But we're saying that it was orchestrated.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that you know, there is market share at stake, and there are interested parties. I mean, I think there's going to be. I personally believe that there's room for both. The market is so young, and these things are so unproven that it's nice that we have both philosophical camps represented in the market now. The ones that think that we should that we should market, or that we should scale on chain. That's the big block folks.
Mm-hmm.
And those that think we should scale Bitcoin using second layer solutions like segregated witness in conjunction with Lightning Network. Everybody wants Bitcoin to scale. Everybody wants Bitcoin to keep its decentralization, but it's a question of prioritization. What do you think is most important? And that's that's the question I want to explore with you guys, because that's a sociological question. Like, that's what is going to work in society better. It's not a technology question. The technology works and it does its thing. It's been tested and retested, but it matters how people interact with the technology, and that's based on human nature. So let's take a look at the real nexus of the question. There's a really great article in Forbes. It's an opinion piece by Spencer Bogart here, where he says Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, a story of prioritization and healthy competition in money. Right? We all want a new form of money. We've talked many times on these evenings about the injustices of the present day global monetary system and what we can expect to get, or what we want to get with these new decentralized solutions. But I think smart people can disagree about how we go about these things. And it comes down to this question right here. And I want to stress that this is just a matter of prioritization. I think both camps want both things. This is a useful way to look at it. So you've got Bitcoin on the left and Bitcoin Cash on the right. And then you've got the two things that are important to the various parties. You've got the decentralization and the highly censor-resistant network, or the Bitcoin gold or settlement layer aspects of the money, versus enabling fast, cheap payments that are good for a cup of coffee, the proverbial cup of coffee that Roger Ver wants to spend his crypto on. And now I just want to reemphasize that both camps want both things. It's just a matter of prioritization. The Bitcoin Cash folks think that the high priority is enabling fast and cheap transactions, because they want to get the whole world using crypto, right? If transactions cost $12, $15 a piece, you're certainly not going to get the unbanked using it. You're not going to get well, it's going to exclude large swaths of the world's population, because if you want to send $5, you're not going to spend $15 to send $5. It's just not going to work, right? So there are in the camp that we need to make it as cheap as possible for as long as possible, so that we can get lots of adoption. And if we've got mass adoption, then that's going to keep the banks at bay, the regulators at bay, and if we have so many people using it, we can even get the anonymity that we want, or fungibility, which is a quality of useful money in the money use case. So who would like to give me their prioritization of these things? What should we be prioritizing and why? Who's a Bitcoin Cash person?
Well, if I'm looking at that, I'm more Bitcoin Cash, because I mean, from my experience over the weekend, it was useless. You couldn't make transactions in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
It took hours, or it just hung, so it became completely useless.
Right.
But to me, it revealed a big Achilles heel to it right there.
Mm-hmm.
That when they basically threw out 7-2x, and basically said, the Bitcoin Cash either was orchestrated, or they saw an opportunity and jumped on it and made that situation make it apparent that Bitcoin Cash can be overloaded, and it just doesn't matter. You put in a transaction, okay, go away for 10 hours, and maybe it'll go through.
Right. Well, the Bitcoin network was still operating as it should, and there's a fee marketplace although it to the user it seems slow, what's really happening is the fee that was attached to the transaction was either miscalculated or was too low, and the Bitcoin network can only put so many transactions into each block, and so the user experience is this thing is slow, and if the fee is not high enough, then it could be delayed for days or weeks, especially if this hash rate, we'll get to that in a moment, Matthew mentioned it, if the difficulty adjustment makes it so that blocks are no longer arriving every 10 minutes, but maybe they're arriving every 15 minutes, maybe every 20 minutes. There's also this thing.
How high do the fees get?
Well, the fees can get quite high.
No, I mean over the weekend. How high did they get?
Well, it's hard to think about fees for normal people because they're priced in Satoshis per byte. How many people can think of Satoshis per byte? But the average transaction is 225 bytes. And if it's, say, 225 Satoshis per byte, that's like about $3. But if you have larger transactions, they can get, well, there are some people out there that have Bitcoin addresses with 81 inputs. So 81 different people sent Bitcoin to one address. And if you want to move all of that money, you've got a transaction that is huge. And in one case that I looked at, it was there was about $1,800 sitting at the Bitcoin address, and it was going to cost $1,200 to move it. So after you move it, you only have $500. This is at the peak of the network congestion, and this is because it has a particularly large series of inputs. But it really, at that point in time, your money really is immovable, especially if you expect, the conditions to change. You're going to wait around until the network congestion goes down, but that's also highly inconvenient. You know, sitting around and waiting until you think that your transaction is going to clear.
I mean, Bitcoin turned like to a bank. It was Sunday, the bank was closed.
Yes.
Yeah, seemingly. The user experience is identical. I agree. So that's the case for Bitcoin Cash. Does anyone want to make the point for digital gold? Why would we abide such terrible user experience?
If you enable the fast payments, etc. now, that's great, but that's centralizing it more. So, and you can't decentralize later. But if you keep it decentralized now, you can always improve the payment speed at a later date in the future. So I think we're trying to be too quick at evolving what we're doing.
Right. Well, and this is the hypothesis, right? This is why it's so contentious, because we don't really know where the centralization is going to happen, if the centralization is going to happen, if we're giving up that second thing, maintaining Bitcoin qualities as a public, permissionless, and highly censor-resistant network. Are we giving that up by going with fast transactions?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. But what's the alternative? Isn't Bitcoin going to be running on a sidechain Lightning network?
This is good. Like, there's lots of people like yes and no. And this is what we have to figure out together. I mean, we don't have to figure it out really, because we can just hold both. But eventually, the market will decide. Maybe I think maybe they can both exist together. But it remains to be seen how the global population, with a global permissionless ledger, reacts to these varying conditions. We don't really know what's going to happen. This is brand new stuff. But like you said, we definitely don't want to give up Bitcoin's decentralized nature, because we've already got centralized fast payments. And we all know what the problem is with the current system. Anybody who uses PayPal or banks, this is what Bitcoin Cash or Western Union. This is what Bitcoin Cash is competing against. They're saying we want to go toe-to-toe with PayPal. We want to go toe-to-toe with the banks. And the banks do not have the overhead of a blockchain. right? The banks have an Oracle database. It takes 2 seconds. They don't have to synchronize their ledgers. They don't have to broadcast their transactions. They don't have to reconcile with anybody else. It just happens at the speed of light in an Oracle database. Whiz, boom, bang. It's much faster and much less expensive than a blockchain, because a blockchain is just a very slow, very expensive database. But what you get for that slowness and what you get for that expense is the immutability, the consensus, and the agreement from everybody on the state of reality, right?
Yeah, a question, like, why would I don't know, I'm an idealist, right? I have had Bitcoins for a long time. So my question is, why would I struggle using Bitcoin Cash just because it's faster? And I don't know what's the difference with my Visa Payway. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
If I'm heading down that direction, why?
Right. And if Bitcoin Cash gets co-opted or is somehow centralized to the point where somebody can say this transaction is priority over this transaction, or we're going to blacklist this person or that person or this organization, then you are really right back to where you started from.
So where's Bitcoin Cash at?
Yeah, I don't know. It remains to be seen if the centralization happens. I think that's the big question mark, is can we move to these 8 megabyte blocks? So we went from 1 megabyte blocks to 8 megabyte blocks. So the blocks are empty. We're going to show you that in a minute. They've got empty blocks. So every transaction that happens over the next 10 minutes is going to make it into the next block. So there is no fee market, right? You can put a 1 cent fee on there, and they might as well put that in the block, because they're just leaving money on the table otherwise. This is a factor in the economics of the choice between the two, and I think it's not widely understood what's going to happen later on. So I'm gonna show you a few more graphs, and maybe we can get into that. But
the way I see it, there is only one way for Bitcoin Cash, and that's path towards centralization. Because the blocks are bigger, the chains are getting longer and longer, and they need way more storage and computing capacity. And over the years, you need to buy so much more equipment just to run and mine and process Bitcoin Cash that only bigger and bigger corporations will be able to afford the hardware to process Bitcoin Cash. So I actually can't see another way for Bitcoin Cash but centralization.
But they're adjusting the difficulty levels for Bitcoin Cash.
But still, you need to store the whole chain. Storage is getting huge, 8 times the size of everything else.
Well, consider this too, guys. Every Bitcoin Cash transaction needs to be stored in perpetuity forever. Right? That goes in a database on a hard drive. It's broadcast on the network, so it's on tens of thousands of hard drives, and those things are stored forever, right? And so anyone using this permissionless ledger, essentially, they can use it for free because there is no contention for space, right? I can put a 1 cent transaction on my Bitcoin Cash transaction, and it's going to make it into the block. And everyone that uses Bitcoin Cash forever is going to need to store my transaction. By the way, there's a text field in the Bitcoin blockchain, Bitcoin Cash blockchain. So I can put data in the blockchain, and I can use that for my own purposes. So maybe I have like an escrow service or a smart contract service or something else that I want to write on some immutable ledger. Where can I write it for virtually nothing, for 1 cent? I get a free database, a free immutable database. I can write to it for 1 cent. I can put all my data in the data field, right? Maybe it's the hash of some function that I use on my internal systems. And I can store that in perpetuity on this free blockchain. So I question the economics of it. I'm an economist. We've got unlimited supply of database space, right? They're never planning to limit the space so that a fee marketplace can exist. And so isn't there going to be less and less economic incentive for these miners to participate in the Bitcoin Cash blockchain? Don't forget that there's a halving every 4 years. So the miners are incentivized to participate based on the block reward. And we already established that they're probably not going to be getting very much in fees. So 4 years from now, it's going to be, I think, 6.25 Bitcoin Cash every 10 minutes. So all of those miners are going to have to provide those free in perpetuity databases for half the block reward every 10 minutes.
Getting miners to mine is not the problem. You don't need that much mining power anyway to just secure against double spending. Simply if you have a huge amount of users with huge amounts of transaction, a so small fee that you don't care about it will be enough to secure against double spending. The problem is the storage. The transaction fees, they do not pay for storage. The storage is just an externality. That's a big problem. It's the same problem in Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. It's just slightly different scales. But you don't pay for storage.
Right, but at least there's a contention for space, and people pay for the space on the Bitcoin network. Would you agree?
So it could grow less wildly, but it's still going to grow. And Bitcoin will have to increase the block size because even with Lightning Network, it's not enough to run the world on Bitcoin with a 1 megabyte of space. No way. So
right.
It has to be increased even with the Lightning Network fully.
Right, yeah. And that change is at their disposal. When and if it becomes a necessity. I mean, people were arguing that it's already a necessity, so I guess we will have that that fight again. Yeah, that's what it comes down to, is how, one of the things we don't know about this tech, because it is brand new tech, we don't know how to scale it, and we're figuring out as we go. Meanwhile, billions of dollars ride in the balance. Yeah, it's high stakes poker.
Manu just wrote you can run pruning. Do you guys know about pruning? What is pruning?
Pruning pruning the size of the blockchain. So after it gets, you take a snapshot of it, you've got a fingerprint of that snapshot, and then you don't have to store as much, or maybe they store the legacy stuff in an old database or not on the chain. But yeah, there's going to be people that come up with sometimes we tend to think about these things as if everything we know now is going to be the case in forever, and it's a dynamic situation. Somebody could have a very creative solution for the exponentially growing blockchain, like pruning, and likely will if there's an economic incentive to do so.
Has anyone tried pruning using, taking all the blockchain and having it pruned and continuing on a side chain?
Not that I know of. I'm sure there's people looking at it, because it's a known problem that we're storing every transaction from every person forever. I don't know. It seems like somebody's probably thought about that pitfall.
But the pruning is part of the origin.
Yeah, it's probably people writing scientific papers on it and so on.
Project called Pascal Coin, where you only have to store the last 30 blocks.
All right, let's take a look at some more stuff. So, Matthew, you talked about the difficulty, and the difficulty. How many people understand difficulty? How many people don't understand difficulty? Okay, so the difficulty. Bitcoin attempts to reach consensus every 10 minutes. It's got all these computers working together, running the same software, and every 10 minutes they're supposed to agree on the state of reality, right? And how do you get them to do that every 10 minutes? Well, you can't really determine exactly 10 minutes. You can only determine how difficult the problem is that all these computers are trying to solve. So we have this thing called difficulty, which represents all of these computers that are participating in the Bitcoin network. They're crunching away, trying to find the solution to the problem presented from the last block. And when they do, they say, I found the solution. I'm going to create the next block, and everybody can start working on the next block. This is what a blockchain is. right? And the difficulty is adjusted for Bitcoin every 2 weeks. So it takes the average of all the computing power over the course of that 2 weeks. And then at a certain point in time, it says, okay, based on the work that everyone's been doing for the last 2 weeks, we're going to adjust the difficulty up or adjust the difficulty down, right? And you can see this is a historical chart of the Bitcoin difficulty since, let's see, is that December of 2016. So you can see that there's more and more computers or more powerful computers trying to solve this problem all the time. It's almost always going up, the difficulty, but what happens here around November 9th? We get a bunch of miners defect to Bitcoin Cash, and we get a drastic reduction in the difficulty for the Bitcoin network. And so what does that mean? That means that if you've got lots and lots of computers working on the problem, and then all of a sudden half those computers are now working on the problem, it takes more than 10 minutes for the next block to arrive, right? If there's half as many computers, then maybe a block will arrive in 20 minutes.
Did it drop by half, like 50%?
It didn't. It dropped just by whatever the percentage is between there and there. I mean, we basically went back to the difficulty from, late October. It wasn't that big a deal. But let's compare it to Bitcoin Cash. We can see it here. And this is a site that Manu told me about, and I spent the morning kind of taking a look at it. What does this show us? Don't let the graph scare you, because I'll explain what you're looking at. The dotted line is the hashing power, right? It's the difficulty. And the solid line is a ratio. And here is the input for the ratio. It's block Coinbase, which is the block reward. For Bitcoin, it's 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes, plus the fees in Satoshis over the block difficulty, right? So this is giving you a relationship between how much a block is worth and how much the difficulty is for your machinery to solve the next Bitcoin problem, right? So it tells you basically how profitable it is to mine each coin. And you've got Bitcoin in orange and Bitcoin Cash in purple, right? And this site is doing a real-time calculation of the profitability for a miner to mine Bitcoin Cash versus mining Bitcoin itself. So, as a miner, you can make a philosophical choice, like I believe in Bitcoin Cash, so I'm going to mine that. But at this point in time, you're taking a 76% hit currently. Now, historically, you can see for the last 7 days, it goes the other direction. But at this moment in time, if you've got a switch and you can just flip them, it's more profitable to mine Bitcoin over Bitcoin Cash, right? And this graph actually shows the miners reacting to the economic incentives to mine on one chain or the other. You can see right here, there were people kind of defecting to Bitcoin Cash, and there's more and more people mining Bitcoin Cash. And you can see that the profitability flip-flopped here, and it was more profitable to mine Bitcoin Cash than Bitcoin. But that drew a bunch of miners, that adjusted the difficulty, and look, the difficulty adjusted, and then all the miners bailed out, right?
How long does it take for that to adjust?
It adjusts every 2 weeks for Bitcoin. For Bitcoin Cash, they're doing lots of creative things to overcome this problem or make this problem go away. In fact, they just forked Bitcoin Cash, and they're some very smart people addressing this problem in the fork, is my understanding. It's too bad Manu's not here, because he could probably tell us more about what went into the last fork.
He's listening to following.
Let's say almost 10 years.
Tech,
that's
not so new anymore.
That's pruning.
Oh, that was about
So look, this phenomenon happened again, where you've got Bitcoin Cash. Remember, the Bitcoin Cash price went up. So this is priced in dollars. So all of a sudden, it was way more profitable to mine Bitcoin Cash. So these miners are they're flip-flopping. They're like, I'm going to mine Bitcoin Cash. I'm going to turn my computer and my hashing power and my securing the network power over to Bitcoin Cash. At this point in time, Bitcoin Cash has more computing power securing it than Bitcoin itself. But what does that mean? That means that when the difficulty adjustment happens, boom, all of a sudden the problem is so difficult that even though I have this big machine, I'm not going to get that block reward. anymore because there's too many people competing for it, right? And the difficulty is too high. And so,
So
I mean-
that precipitated the drop in the price.
and yeah, that changed that created the drop in the price because, as you can imagine, all these miners that have all this newly valuable Bitcoin Cash with fixed overhead costs like rent and electricity, they're selling that Bitcoin Cash on the open market to pay their costs in fiat, and that drives the price back down again. So these are economic phenomenon and just the various players. I mean, this is where game theory comes in. People talk about the game theory aspects of the ecosystem. You know, if I do this, then the other guys are going to do this, and if I make this move, then the other guy's going to make this move. And you start playing chess with each other, trying to make decisions based on what's happening now and what's going to happen, and how am I going to have the most profitable operation. Most miners are notorious for acting in their economic self-interest as opposed to ideological or philosophical grounds in most cases. But yeah, this is what has happened over the last month. Let's look at some of these other graphs. Let's look at the reward. This is kind of interesting. This is the block reward for Bitcoin and for Bitcoin Cash. How much are these guys making? The average block reward plus fees, right? So you can see that there's a lot more money in Bitcoin than in Bitcoin Cash, right? But for an individual miner, that might not be true. Like for an individual miner, it might make more sense to be on Bitcoin Cash. But in terms of total dollars trading places, I mean, Bitcoin's worth $7,000. Bitcoin Cash is worth, $1,000. So there's a lot more economy happening up here in Bitcoin, but there's also a lot more competition. Let's look at the fees though. Check this out. This is the amount of fees, and you can see the Bitcoin ecosystem is relying on fees. So you got the block reward every 10 minutes, 12.5 baby new Bitcoins are born. They're really cute when they first. And then, but you've also got. But then you've also got the fees. That's a further incentive to mine Bitcoin over Bitcoin Cash, because you can see the fees are just not even registering on this graph.
It looks like we're using Uber.
And then here's the percentage, the fees as a percentage, and you can see Bitcoin at certain points in time, 40% of the block is made up of fees, and that's people paying to get their transaction into the Bitcoin blockchain because of the immutability and the decentralized nature of that chain. Questions? Is this all making sense?
So I've got a question. So there's like a backlog of like over 100,000 transactions in the Bitcoin network right
The
now.
mempool.
So is that related to the fact that they don't have enough hashing power to process it, or is there like a bunch of different small transactions like spamming the Bitcoin network to clog it on purpose to make a point that Bitcoin Cash is superior? I don't know.
That's a good question. Mel is my plant. She's here to ask the. Here is the Bitcoin mempool as represented on BTC.com. 125 megabytes. How big is a Bitcoin block?
1 megabyte.
1 megabyte. So we've got 125 periods of 10 minutes. I don't know how long that is, but well, it's a little bit smaller now. Let's see. What is it? So it's about 109 megs. So we've got enough people waiting for Bitcoin transactions for the next 109 blocks.
That's a
Is that good? Is that bad? What's
What was it at like a week ago before all this was happening?
Well, it has gone up recently, and the question is why, and what are those transactions made up of? Here's a distribution of what people paid for those transactions. You can see the vast majority are at this 20, like lower than 20 Satoshis per byte. So anybody, I mean, Bitcoin lives in the wild, right? So I had this conversation with Manu earlier today, like what is spam? I mean, if Bitcoin wants to live in the wild, there really is no such thing as spam. It's supposed to be able to take whatever anybody does I mean, it's a free world. Anybody can do anything. And Bitcoin, you know, it lives in the wild. It's a wild animal. It lives in the jungle. And so it's got to be able to abide transactions, for example, that are almost 1 megabyte in size, that have you know, if that were the case, then you can imagine that it would be tens of thousands of dollars for that one transaction. But if they price that transaction at near the going rate, then you can imagine the backlog that would cause, right? It costs money to quote unquote spam the Bitcoin network, but there are people that have done it. We've proven it in the past that people simply to create the backlog or to make a point that Bitcoin's not scalable, they would create these large transactions, very large transactions, and then they would create the fee so that it was on a Satoshi per byte basis. It was really quite near the going rate, meaning that everybody else had to jump up to that rate if they wanted to get their transactions to clear in a reasonable time. So call that spam or call that just fair play, call that, you know, that's life in the big city. But these things, if we really want an immutable, decentralized, permissionless ledger, it's got to be able to abide these kinds of quote unquote attacks or quote unquote spam, because it's got to live and breathe and you know, you can't call mommy and daddy, or you can't defer to anybody here. It's just, the whole point is that it's a autonomous functioning thing living on the internet. So
It's alive.
yeah, well, and this is why when we talk about Bitcoin Cash, you know, is it going to be able to run this kind of gauntlet? You know, yeah, we're getting more transactions per second, but are we going to have other things develop over time that make it co-optable or centralized? We don't know yet. All right, so here's I was calculating. Basically, this is telling us that, does anyone have a calculator? Right now, they're recommending 159 Satoshis per byte. The average Bitcoin transaction, if you just have one input, two outputs, is about 225 bytes. So what's 225 times 159?
225
225 times 159
is 0.35775 Bitcoin.
Wait, 159 times 225? 159 times 225. 225 is the average. So 357. So right now, at this very moment, an average Bitcoin transaction costs $2.35 US to send. So not really good for a cup of coffee, but maybe if you wanted to send $100 from, you know, maybe even a low-cost worker wants to send $100 home, you know, $2 is not that bad a fee when you compare it to MoneyGram or Western Union. This is still, you know, there's still some utility here. You know, it's expensive. I mean, you really don't even want to spend your Bitcoin at Kismet or, you know, to buy a $10 hamburger because you're paying 20% in fees. That's not even palatable. You're only moving large amounts of money when fees are up in $2 and $3. And by the way, this is only the average transaction or the minimum transaction. Many transactions are much larger and more expensive. And like I mentioned, during the height of it, I mean, there was a Bitcoin address with $1,700 worth of value, and it was going to cost $1,200 to send it. So only $500 is going to arrive at the other end. Yeah, that's the state of affairs. It's a tough time. We've looked at this before. This is the Bitcoin clock, and some people find this useful when thinking about the difficulty thing. You know, like I said, the Bitcoin clock is trying to keep a tempo of 10-minute blocks. So it's, you know, every tick of the clock is like 10 minutes, supposed to be. But really, it counts blocks, not time, right? So, you know, the difficulty adjustment is supposed to happen every 2016 blocks, right? It's supposed to happen every 2 weeks. But, you know, if the difficulty gets out of whack, if half of the miners defect, that could turn into a month instead of 2 weeks. And then maybe that harms the Bitcoin price. So even more miners leave. And there's this phenomenon called the difficulty death spiral. Does anybody know what the difficulty death spiral scenario is? Okay, so Bitcoin Cash, I think, is in a better position to avoid this problem because, well, they already had a bit of a problem with difficulty because they forked Bitcoin, but they adopted the difficulty history. So you can imagine with Bitcoin Cash, only a certain percentage of the miners defected. So the hashing power went down so that they weren't getting 10-minute blocks. They were getting blocks that were taking longer. So the Bitcoin Cash developers were working hard to create a different difficulty algorithm. And I think that's what they introduced with this latest hard fork. But Bitcoin itself has no such code to dynamically change the difficulty except for every 2 weeks. So this minute hand right here represents the difficulty, and every 2 weeks it's going to change. But let's say that here's Bitcoin, the blockchain, the chain death spiral, a fatal Bitcoin vulnerability. This is something we should probably all take a look at, or at least understand. Okay, so here's the scenario. You've got your Bitcoin difficulty, right? Look at all these computers. I mean, this represents the biggest supercomputer in the world, right? It's bigger than any organizational computing power that we know of. Who knows? Maybe the NSA has like some computer that blows everything else away. But as far as we know, Bitcoin is the most powerful cloud computing platform on the planet, right? And this amount of computing power is very difficult to replace, very expensive and very difficult to replace. But right now, this is the difficulty we need in order to get 10-minute blocks. So there's so many people that want to participate in Bitcoin. There's so many people that want to apply their computing power to the Bitcoin problem because they're going to get a block reward and fees, that we've got on our hands this incredible supercomputer that uses lots and lots of electricity, and it is very expensive. And if you can imagine a scenario where half the miners left and we went right down to here and went back in time, back to difficulty of, where we were in July of 2017. But what's going to happen? Let's say that they defected right after a difficulty adjustment. So we had our 2-week period, lots and lots of people participating. We're up here at a peak computing power, and then the difficulty adjusts, but half the miners leave. So you've still got a difficulty up here, but only half the computers are working on that problem. So you don't get a block every 10 minutes, you get a block every 20 minutes, right? And it's still a 1 megabyte block. So what happens to the mempool? The mempool starts growing and growing and growing. People start complaining that the Bitcoin network doesn't work. Maybe everybody that has their fake Bitcoin on exchanges basically they're off blockchain representations of Bitcoin on Bitcoin exchanges around the world, maybe they start selling their Bitcoin, right? So the price of Bitcoin goes down, which means the mining reward goes down, which means more miners leave, which means there's fewer computers trying to, and let's say it goes down to 25%, but we haven't gotten to our 2-week readjustment. So now you've got 25% of the hashing power trying to solve difficulties where there was 75% more computers working on the problem. So that now your blocks, instead of coming every 20 minutes, they come every hour, right? And then the price goes down, more miners leave, and all of a sudden you've got the death grip. We never find the next block because no one, there's not a critical mass of miners to apply their power. They're busy mining on another chain, the thing that replaces Bitcoin itself.
Trying to scare us.
Yeah. Just go with it.
I know Edmund in the group has been going on and on about this problem.
Who wrote this article? It was Reddit, but there was no author on it.
Let's see. It's like a blog.
It was published in Bali.
But that's only to readjust right there.
Right. When it readjusts, if you can get to that 2 week period, then the difficulty will go way down. It'll all of a sudden it'll become very profitable. They'll pile back in. You'll see a phenomenon like we saw.
It could be a buy time.
I mean, you'll see a phenomenon like we saw here. Excuse me. You see a phenomenon like we saw here, where the miners just they get involved and then they drop off and then they get back involved and drop off. But yeah, there is that scenario that's worth exploring. And what happens if we find ourselves, 1 week into a 2 week difficulty adjustment period and we've lost 75% of our hashing power? What will we do?
Wait.
I've
seen the worst times.
Well, the other dynamic for that is that people can't trade Bitcoin. Like if your Bitcoin wasn't on an exchange, then you can't send Bitcoin to anybody to sell it anyway. So
But this scenario is pretty obvious to the developers of Bitcoin Core, of course, as well. They must have some emergency exit plan, or
there's nothing in the code. To my understanding, there's nothing in the code. But you can see that even with a hostile takeover, Bitcoin Cash, there was a big PR push. Like everybody was saying, there was the flippening, and we only lost this much hash power. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
Maybe Bitcoin's just too far ahead in terms of valuation that it's harder to influence it.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot of momentum behind it. I mean, there's a lot of software written for it. There's a lot of faith in the developers. There's places that have already set themselves up to use Bitcoin as money. This doesn't exist yet for Bitcoin Cash, so it's got a ways to go to catch up.
The Japanese government could have a backup. I mean, they're all in Bitcoin, so.
Yeah. I don't know what would play out in that scenario, but maybe we just have to wait for a long time to get the next block, and then the difficulty would snap back into place, and maybe they would have in the meantime written a different algorithm for the difficulty calculation.
But maybe it's not at all the Civil War. It's just they're just doing pump and dumps so they can make their money, and they're going to do this over and over.
Did we lose?
Bitcoin Cash is their tool. Maybe they have no intention of making it.
I do not know. I do not know what's going to happen, but we're about to find out.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
The
The problem is the enough miners leave, it may never get to the next difficulty adjustment. Yes, this is what we were just talking about. So it can be much longer than 2 weeks.
Because there's people with large holdings that may not have traditionally been. They're finding time for them to put skin into the game.
Yeah, some of the Japanese.
Like hardware.
We just have to wait. Wait.
So
Yeah, I've got 10 on to try and bring that network back online.
I got a question for you guys. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Was there a point?
Yeah.
I was just saying there is motivation for new miners to enter the market if you've got a large holding. Like let's say you've got 25,000 bitcoins, and you're currently mining. All of a sudden you're at risk of losing the network. It's time for you to get involved as a miner.
Right. That's an extra incentive. I mean, all the miners that have all the existing bitcoins that they have, they don't want to see that. Right. So they might throw their weight behind it to get that next block to happen because, that's a good point.
Yeah, the miners have to wait a certain amount of blocks ahead. Like they win a block and then they have to wait like 70 blocks before they actually get the Bitcoin. Is that right?
Oh,
So
yeah,
they're
there is.
incentivized
Yeah,
not
because
to
there's.
just throw it away.
Yeah, because there are coin splits, and I don't think they can spend the Coinbase for a little while, or if they do, they're people who accept it are taking a chance, and there's norms around that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the question I have for you guys is why is there so much vitriol between the two camps? It seems to me that there's two philosophical positions, right? They're exploring this trade-off that we talked about here, this one, where do we really want fast, cheap transactions, or do we want to prioritize maintaining the centralization? We don't know what's going to happen in the future because we've never done this before. I mean, this is new tech, and it's a new sociological phenomenon, right? You can make metaphors, or you can explore the logical ends, or you can explore the game theory aspects, but we don't really know what's going to happen. And personally, I'm kind of glad that we have both. I mean, everybody that had Bitcoin before August 1st of 2017 has both things, has both Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. You know, all the people that, you know, Bitcoin went down to 5,500 and Bitcoin Cash went up over 2,000. Like the net was a wash. You know, you still have the same amount of value. And really what's happening is, you know, we're beginning to explore the possibility of, you know, is the on-chain scaling what will work, or is this Lightning Network and SegWit contraption that they've created, is that what's necessary? We don't know, but now we've got two things wild in the marketplace for the marketplace to decide which one they like. And it's amazing to me, like even now we're post-split. There was a lot of, you know, the whole reason we got the New York agreement was because it was like civil war. There was an impasse, and there was so much fighting because everybody wanted what they wanted, right? There was the big blockers, and there was this SegWit, and we were never going to get consensus. And on August 1st, we got the split, so we got both things, right? And now that that SegWit 2x is dead, it's even more clear that we've got two horses to back. But if you go over to Reddit, let me show you this. You guys probably don't look at Reddit a lot because it's blocked in Indonesia, but this is the Bitcoin subreddit, and this is the BTC subreddit. So our Bitcoin is the Segregated Witness and Bitcoin Core folks, and our BTC is Roger Ver, Jihan Wu, and the Big Block Camp. And if you look at the headlines here, they're almost all about the other coin. Like mempool breaks resistance trend. This is a joke showing that the mempool looks like a price graph, or like it's following you know, pricing trends. And confessions of a core supporter. So like, you know, somebody who switched from Bitcoin Core to Bitcoin Cash. I can run a BCH node on a Raspberry Pi. This is something that, you know, this is something the other campus. So there's no, that like, what my point is, there's all kinds of, there's lots of attacking of the other side, and there's not like, hey, we've got a good idea. We've got our head down. We're working on our philosophical choice. But at least on Reddit, there's all this energy going into why the other side is so bad. And it seems to me there's like a big enough pie to go around. Like anybody who's in crypto now, if crypto succeeds, like they're going to have a lot of money. They're going to have, they will have won. Like everybody in this room will, 10 years from now, we will be winners if we pay attention. If the crypto idea succeeds and we're still in the game 10 years from now, we will all be very happy, whether it's Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin, it's Bitcoin Core. So why all the fighting? I mean, it's like tribalism, or like New York versus Boston from, you know, where I come from, or it's yeah, like it's like you almost have to have an enemy. Like people love to have an enemy or a bad guy. And the bad guys used to be like the status quo, you know, like Bank of America. Like, why are you charging me, you know, $100 to send $1,000? You know, why are you, yeah, the bad guys used to be the status quo system. And now nobody ever talks about that stuff anymore. I mean, everybody talks about how, you know, the conspiracy theories about the other side and how they're, you know, it's a corporate takeover, it's a coup, it's, and even now after we've got, you know, one camp in the big block coin, one camp in the Bitcoin segregated witness scaling solution camp, you've still got the tribalism, and I don't know, maybe it'll die down, maybe it's just all too new, maybe it's too soon.
I think that's what's driving the economics, though. I mean, for sounding bad, but war is good for economics, right? I mean,
competition is
I know
good.
that sounds terrible, but I mean, maybe this is someone stirring the pot.
Or good for economy, that's.
Well,
Sorry, please don't quote me on that.
well, I think I would say competition is good.
Yeah.
You know, like it's good to have that we have these two choices and let them like fight it out. I mean, I'm not even totally opposed to quote unquote spamming the other network, because if it survives, they learn something. And like I said earlier tonight, I mean, these things have to exist in the wild. I mean, you can't call mommy and daddy. You can't run to a lawyer. I mean, these things just, they are what they are. They need to exist in the wild. And if they don't work in the wild, even if somebody wants to be a bad actor, it's supposed to abide all of the bad actors that whatever they could possibly do.
So
And there's another.
Okay, the way I see there is that the rest of the environment, the other 1,000 coins or whatever, they're doing actually exactly what kind of is good for the environment. They create something better or create something different. And I think also that Bitcoin Cash will go down this path too. But now they had the opportunity, and I think the big fight was about the name. They wanted to give everything, shoot out everything they have. I think that's why they picked the Sunday to keep Wall Street out as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe everything went according to plan. Bitcoin 2X was meant to be a dummy that gets shot down before it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Everything went down according to plan, and it just didn't quite work out to grab the Bitcoin name.
Do you think it's over?
No, I would doubt that very much if he gives up that easily. He only spent probably a fraction of 6 of his Bitcoin. He's got a lot of ammunition left.
Uh-huh.
I don't see how it's over. But but my point would be that in this moment in time, that's what's going on. They're trying to grab the Bitcoin name. It happens or it might not happen, but after that, they'll be sort of sailing along in the same environment.
Yes.
Happening. I mean, otherwise you just ruin yourself.
I mean, this could be what's motivating some of the bad behavior, because I think there is a battle for the brand, the Bitcoin brand. And of course, I think Roger Ver, he's been around since the very beginning, and he's a very sincere guy. If he's so philosophically sure of his position, of course he wants the Bitcoin brand name. And if the thing that the world at large knows at Bitcoin, if that ends up truly failing, then the whole crypto experiment will be set back by years and years, because most of our grandmothers don't, I mean, they saw Bitcoin on TV, like they've heard it once or twice. And if the thing known as Bitcoin ends up failing or not being useful or kind of becoming marginalized, then, I mean, that really does represent the whole movement, the name Bitcoin. I mean, we all know the whole universe of what's going on, but Bitcoin, as far as the general public is concerned, is like, that's all they know. And if they see a headline, Bitcoin is done, I mean, it's a bad thing. And
That's on the bottom quote you've got up there. It says, Vitalik says, I consider BCH a legitimate contender for the Bitcoin name.
Yeah.
Talking about Bitcoin name.
Yeah, the name is very important. There's
one of the
brand.
most influential people in the whole world of cryptocurrency, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's also, I mean, pro Ethereum, Bitcoin, and
yeah, he's happy if there's.
He's more than happy to buy and comment.
Yeah.
He's happy that we're fighting.
And he gives a compliment back to Roger, because Roger just said how he bought some Ethereum. He's an amazing. Yeah, he's amazing.
Do you actually think if Bitcoin quote fails that, I mean, there's so much blockchain action going on in the corporate world right now. There's so much motivation for corporations to adopt blockchain in general. I mean, just because one crypto or the major branded crypto fails doesn't mean people aren't going to adopt blockchain technology. I mean, that's not going away ever. Bitcoin is just going to.
I think it's here to stay. Yeah. It's just going to be a setback, and it remains to be seen what other use cases will be good for blockchain. I mean, there's definitely a lot of exploration. I was just talking the other day about product provenance or supply chain management using immutable ledgers. It's really exciting stuff, but it's nowhere near the societal impact of the money use case. The money use case is the prize, and I hope that we get it. And it depends on so many things, and there's so many dangers ahead. But it's a long game, and nobody's going to uninvent the blockchain or people trying to create the money use case. So just a matter of when we get it. But I think we're going to get it, which is cool. Pretty cool thing.
On the money side, I think also there is that, there's so many people out there just waiting to get into this game. And lots of people with lots of money. But if you imagine you have 10, 20, $30 million to invest, you cannot invest in crypto other than Bitcoin. I mean, how do you put 30 million in something else than Bitcoin? That's almost impossible.
Depends on how much you have beyond 38 million.
No, I mean, just the practicality of it, without destroying the other markets from the smaller coins. The Bitcoin is the only one where you can put large amounts of money in because it's a large enough,
because of the liquidity,
large enough pool to take it. Everything else is just.
I mean, you could probably buy that much Ethereum. There are Ethereum whales out there, and there's some tweet, but yeah, it doesn't have the store of value track record that Bitcoin has.
Exactly.
But the people that are putting that much money in probably have wildly more than that.
Yeah.
And they're speculating, and actually, the big money is in alts. Like Bitcoin's not going to go 100x in the next year, but there's going to be an alt that goes. There's going to be an alt that goes 100x.
Yeah.
And of course, those big whales will buy Bitcoin first, and then they'll start. They'll get into a small coin and just like buy up 25% of it, and then push it around.
I think that's what's happening right now, with Bitcoin just being the core, the backbone of that right now. And then all the alts, including Bitcoin Cash and all that, just being the alternatives to uses for cryptocurrency. But don't forget, Bitcoin as a brand is getting stronger and stronger through all these attacks and all this exposure that's going on right now. And the local market only knows this. They're only going to look at that price. If the price holds where it is, or if it comes down just by a bit, but everyone knows now Bitcoin's not going to go to zero anymore, or even go down past $1,000 maybe, and that's just going to make the brand stronger and stronger, and it's just going to be that solid. And it's getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah, it's been around for years now, and it's got a track record, and I think it has achieved status at least with a certain population of people as a store of value.
Yeah.
People have bought in at a level, and they're confident that it will never go down below that level. Everybody that bought it at $7,000, they might have a different opinion of Bitcoin as a store of value, especially if it goes back down to around $3,000 or, but if they hold, I mean, when we had these last all-time highs, everybody that ever bought Bitcoin and held it was in the green.
Yeah.
Everybody for the last 9 years, if you just didn't sell, you made a lot of money. And so, and then when these corrections happen, if you can live through a couple of these correction cycles, these big ones, big correction cycles, 5, 10x, and then corrections of 80%. After those things, then you start to see Bitcoin as a store of value, which is a real tenant of money, and it's a social tenant of money. The store of value is something that everybody agrees is the reality of the situation.
That
it takes
is
time.
the interesting thing about the technology, about that, how it's socially tied in and it's all agreed upon.
Yeah.
Consensus.
Yeah, it depends on the people. Somebody could come along tomorrow and build a better Facebook, but if nobody uses it, like, it doesn't matter that it's better, right? And that's it's called network effects. Bitcoin enjoys the greatest network effects as well. Bitcoin is open source software. Any one of us could go copy the Bitcoin software, change the money supply, change the hashing algorithm, call it Ubud coin, and it wouldn't have any value until it had a track record and started getting social buy-in.
And it's doing exactly what it's designed to do up to now. Right, and it's disrupting.
It's
still doing it.
Come on,
Yeah, it is.
It's stronger than ever.
Yeah,
it is. There are these small problems that we talked about. Like Olivier said, he couldn't send a transaction, but did it end up going through eventually? No, it's still in the mempool.
Just forget it. I'm not going to wait 10 hours to forget it.
Oh, okay. So, but how do you know it's not going to be picked up again or go through at some future time?
It was a small tiny amount. It was it was to test the market, test the transaction.
Oh, to do like a little test transaction. And do you know if you were right in the range of an appropriate fee amount, or did you?
After looking at that, I want to double check. I don't remember what it was.
I mean,
That
most
one where you
most
show that fee.
most wallets will do that for you.
Yeah,
But
automatically. So I don't know what it did. So I have
Mhm.
to check what the fee amount was. Maybe that was the issue. It was too low because it was quite a range.
yeah,
And
there's
those
quite,
were the ones you showed before. Was all the transactions that were still unconfirmed.
that we're still stuck. Yeah, where is that,
That's still
guys?
unconfirmed. So
This is the one.
yeah, which is a lot if you think about it. If you look at the top one there, basically 0.0018 Bitcoin for a transaction. It's a fair bit.
Sure is.
Yeah,
They ain't cheap.
but
But if you're sending a load of money, yeah.
But I sent a transaction. I didn't care how long it took. I give my nieces and nephews little birthday gifts. But they're not going to spend it for God knows how long. So I don't care if it arrives in 12
that was
hours.
my situation dealing with paper wallets. I didn't want to take any chances.
Right. But it does come down to. I mean, the Bitcoin network should work fine. It's just a matter of how much it costs you to do it. And actually, the costs can be prohibitively high, like the example that I described, where it costs $1,200 to send $1,700.
I mean, I found a solution. Yeah, I just went to the beach.
That's the beauty of living in Bali, man. You've got options.
I went to the beach and missed the BCH.
That's what I was trying to get. I couldn't get it, so forget it.
I'm gonna reward myself with a day at the beach without a phone, and then
So I have a quick
turn it
question
on.
for you, if you don't mind me interrupting that. So if Bitcoin's a product, we'll call it a product, right? We call it a brand. So let's say it's a product. In my opinion, the value of the product is that it's transactional, right? We can use it to pay for things, and then it's got utility. You're talking a lot about store value being kind of the main reason we're in it right now, which makes sense. It is. And it's a store of value that actually is appreciating at a rapid rate, which is what's garnered so much interest. But if the main product and what the product offers is transactional utility, paying for things cheaply and quickly, why would we want to transact in Bitcoin if we're using it as a store of value that's appreciating at this rate? Like, I don't want to spend my Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so if the main product value of it is transactional utility, and that's not going to happen because we want to store value in it and it's going to appreciate, how will that product become useful enough to be adopted?
It depends on your priorities. I mean, money is a unit of account, a store of value, and a medium of exchange. Right. And we're talking about a battle between store of value and medium of exchange. Bitcoin Cash folks think that the medium of exchange is the most important thing. I think the Bitcoin Core folks would say that the store of value is a higher priority. And I don't know. I mean, good money has all those qualities. So, I mean, we're trying to make the trade-off, the right trade-off.
Bitcoin Cash, right? You use those for your little transactions.
We could. Well, it's interesting given that we're not doing it anymore because of what the Bank of Indonesia has done recently, but we can think about it. We can do a thought experiment and say, like, what if we still want to use crypto in our little Bitcoin economy here in Ubud? We could have Bitcoin Cash that we use for spending, and you can change your Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash whenever you like. Or you can, if you had Bitcoin before August 1st of this year, you can spend your Bitcoin Cash on hamburgers and keep your Bitcoin itself or Bitcoin Core, in cold storage. So
that's looking at it from a transactional fee, but not from like you were saying, the appreciation of value. It's
right.
Bitcoin Cash is still appreciating value, or still has so much volatility.
Yeah, at some point, if utility doesn't come into play, appreciation stops, and if transactional costs don't come down, the utility won't happen.
Well, actually, lack of volatility makes it more attractive as a medium of exchange as well.
Yeah. Because that graph you have where you have like the evolution of money as pure speculation and store of value eventually reaching currency.
That was an opinion, but I don't know if that's.
But that's a good way to understand what's going on, is that we've slipped back into this kind of speculative stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First there's speculation, then there's store of value, then there's medium of exchange. I think is what we postulate.
Medium exchange and utility, I think, really boils down to grassroots, like where we are today. There's no point us talking about a huge economy in New York City and all that. But like in a small community like Hubud, right? If we can create a little micro economy where we're using crypto as a base of a medium of exchange, then you're putting utility and attaching it to that right. And I think blockchain technology is designed for that, to create these little small pockets, to create that utility within the node itself.
Well, we've got a whole universe of coins to play with. So and all of us can mess around and cooperate and
maybe that's the next level, right, Gary?
Yeah.
To take it up the next step is to look at those small case scenarios and how we can hook up maybe a few places here where we can try and get a microeconomy going.
Yeah, I think we should keep talking. Bank of Indonesia notwithstanding. All right, guys.
On that, like latest news on that, or
what's that?
Is there any news on that, like Bank of Indonesia?
Nothing new.
Nothing new.
They don't tend to say too much though. They tend to like say something and then you don't hear from them for like 8 months.
No, the
All right, guys.
The top echelon understand what's going on, but it's a question of the middle part of the government.
Okay,
so we are going to pick up this conversation about how we're going to circumvent the powers that be at Kismet at 7 o'clock. We've got a reservation there. We're heading over to Kismet. But in the meantime, can you see why we need to get together every Tuesday night and talk about this stuff? Next Tuesday, like everything could be different. You've got to come back. In the meantime, I hope you guys will check out the Filter YouTube channel. This is where we're broadcasting. We've got back episodes. I hope you guys will subscribe. We've also got the Bitcoins in Bali community on Facebook. Hubud is where we meet every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my name is Gary, and that's at Dykstranet. Thanks for coming, guys, tonight, and we'll see you next time, same place, same time, same channel. See you then.
Jenga to get out of here.
Yeah. Are we gonna try for a new location?